If you can't accept that Trump gave to Biden a crime spike, an economic collapse, a public health disaster, then you're not critically engaging with the last few years. So yes, we're better off because we got out of a crisis better than any other. Just listen, Dave. Just listen.
Dave Rubin.
We came out of a crisis.
So-called nonpartisan journalist Piers Morgan hosted his latest pro-Trump, anti-Kamala U.S. politics panel, in which he tried to regurgitate MAGA talking points alongside Larry Elder and Dave Rubin. Unfortunately for the three of them, they hit two roadblocks in the form of Democratic strategist Ameisha Cross and my friend and yours, Luke Beasley, progressive political commentator, and he killed it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, this is Luke's second appearance on Piers Morgan Uncensored, and it was even better than the first performance, which was already excellent. We have several clips to look at, but you should definitely watch the full 35-minute episode on Piers Morgan's channel. So we're going to play some of these clips and unpack them together, but the first part concerns Donald Trump's publicity stunt at McDonald's.
Keeps getting upset.
I'm thankful that McDonald's hires felons because they do that in reality as well.
Okay, let me bring in Luke. You want to get him?
Yeah. Well, I will say that MAGA has been repeatedly expressing that they're upset that Kamala is having these fun moments. Oh, she's laughing weird, or stop dancing, there's serious problems. So there's a little bit of hypocrisy there, but I will say this McDonald's thing is the perfect example of how Trump gets away with what he does, because a bunch of people in the media play right into what he's doing, which I agree, a fun little photo op at McDonald's. A lot of people are going to find that likable, ignoring the actual substance, which is he gets asked about the minimum wage. He can't answer it because on policy, he's a failure. So he has to rely on these sorts of stunts to get people to like him. And the media finds it so fascinating. So they forget days before the election what really matters.
But to be clear, you did find this. Just to be clear, you just said you found him likable.
I don't find him super likable, but I understand why a photo shoot like this appeals to people. That's exactly what he's trying to do. Distract from the fact that days before an election, he's promising to go after his political enemies with this enemies from within sort of comment. Distract from the fact that he's the most anti-democratic presidential candidate we've seen in
let me bring in
American politics. Distract from the fact that hundreds of economists are saying that Trump's plan would harm the economy.
Okay, let me bring in Larry. Larry, your response to this.
Well, you're talking to somebody whose father Piers used to clean toilets for a living, save his nickels and dimes, and started a cafe where he sold hamburgers. So I was enjoying the moment. Donald Trump is relatable. He's likable. Regular people who eat at McDonald's liked him.
Except that's not true. Right. So Donald Trump's favorability ratings are still lower than Vice President Harris. Larry Elder and Dave Rubin and Piers Morgan can talk about how much of a cipher she is and how unlikable they find her. But the fact of the matter is that if you look at the polls, Harris is better liked than Trump. That is a fact. And Donald Trump has never been a particularly popular political candidate. He never won the popular vote against Hillary Clinton. He didn't win it against President Biden. Even if he wins the 2024 election, he's almost certainly going to lose the popular vote there as well. And the same issue with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance's favorability, approval ratings have increased, but he's still well behind Tim Walz. Harris Walz is more likable than Trump Vance. So it's just pure cope from Larry Elder. Great performance again by Luke, pointing out the distraction of this completely superficial, photo op by Donald Trump. I noticed that Piers Morgan didn't have a panel about how Donald Trump threatened to use the military against Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, and his Democratic critics. Imagine if Kamala Harris said that. It would be nonstop Piers Morgan coverage.
I do find it interesting, though, that Kamala Harris has gotten a pass for saying she's worked at McDonald's, and Donald Trump is being slammed for doubting it. I saw a headline that said Donald Trump, without evidence, says that Kamala Harris didn't work at McDonald's.
Trump hasn't demonstrated in any way whatsoever. Trump has not brought forward any evidence to refute. No, she doesn't have to go back. I don't have proof of every job I worked. What was it, in high school or college? And she's not going to waste time right before.
But Luke, you don't think it's odd? Luke,
this is what Trump needs to do, though.
So again, what Luke is pointing out is that it's up to apparently Vice President Kamala Harris to disprove Trump's claim. This idea that she has to produce receipts or a W-2 form from a summer gig that she had in her youth. She's 60 years old. This idea is just preposterous. And the idea that Donald Trump, for a stage photo op that was cleared by Secret Service, somehow negates that is categorically ridiculous. And he's right to point out the double standard. Another clip.
Aside from the strange spectacle of Alec Baldwin making his comeback, which I think feels a little too soon, perhaps, the nature of her going on Fox News, I thought it was quite a ballsy move to do it. I've got to be reasonable credit to her for going on there. It got a massive audience, the biggest audience of any interview in the whole presidential race. Do you think it, in the end, though, was a good or not so good move for her?
She came to do exactly what she did. I think that pointing out Donald Trump's instigations of wanting to eradicate certain news networks, calling out individuals who he wanted to issue prosecutions of, who have spoken out against him or who didn't support him. She went on to do what she needed to do. And I think that in terms of going on Fox, yes, it has a big audience, but she wasn't necessarily trying to draw in an audience that is largely Trump and MAGA supporters. People know what Fox News is, as much as she was going into the house that Donald Trump built in many ways, the same place that has been sued multi-million dollars over for lying about election fraud in the 2020 election, and she shook up their house. That's what she intended to do during this campaign, and then she walked off. And I think that she did a very strong job of it. It was not going to be a friendly space. She knew that going in. That just is what it is. This was the first time she'd sat down with Fox during this entire cycle. And I think that it made a difference because it showcased that she wasn't afraid to have the conversation, but also that she walked away, just rose like the phoenix, as strong as she was when she walked in.
All right, Larry.
And again, this is important. I think Ameisha Cross makes a really compelling point here, also because it echoes one that I've made too, which is that Fox paid nearly $800 million, which was basically a loyalty tithe to Donald Trump. They paid $787 million to settle a defamation case brought against them by Dominion Voting Systems. Again, when you consider the robust First Amendment protections that companies enjoy in this country, that meant that the case against Fox News was staggering, such that they felt they would lose a trial despite those considerable protections by the First Amendment. If you look at the materials and text messages and emails and other correspondence that were released during discovery, it makes sense why they chose to settle. They were probably going to lose. The fact of the matter is they knowingly signal boosted Donald Trump's lies about the 2020 election. Fox is more hostile to Harris than CNN and even MSNBC are to Trump, just objectively speaking. CNN and MSNBC didn't have to pay $1 billion or nearly $1 billion to settle a defamation case. Fox is objectively more corrupt and more partisan even than those institutions, to the extent that you have those criticisms. And she still took the damn interview. And she caught Brett Baier in a gotcha, such that Brett Baier himself the next day had to publicly own the fact that she got the better of him and that he did play the wrong clip. Great performance. But now, having given Ameisha Cross her due, met her at the DNC. She's amazing. Let's get back to Luke.
News. The problem is much more fundamental. Are you better off now than you were 3.5, 4 years ago? The average family of four is spending $1,200 a month more for the same goods and services as that family spent 3.5, 4 years ago. We're paying 50% more for gas than we were 3.5, 4 years ago. That's the problem. And that is why I believe she's going to lose.
Okay, Luke, you're shaking your head there. Why?
Yeah. What is this bizarre thing that MAGA is trying to force onto Americans, this collective amnesia? We were in the middle of the pandemic 4 years ago. Yes, we're better off. And the very problems that people will cite to argue against the economic success of Biden-Harris are the numbers that are a direct outcome. Be just a little bit honest for a moment, Dave and Larry. Are a direct outcome of pandemic conditions.
A little bit honest.
If you can't accept that, if you can't accept that Trump was making deals with Saudi Arabia and Russia to cut oil production, that caused the spike going into Biden-Harris. If you can't accept that Trump gave to Biden a crime spike, an economic collapse, a public health disaster, then you're not critically engaging with the last few years. So yes, we're better off because we got out of a crisis better than any other. Well, just listen, Dave. Just listen.
Dave Rubin.
We came out of a crisis.
All right, Luke, let Dave respond to that.
Well, there's so much there. I mean, first off, it was the Democrats, once Biden took over, who made the pandemic situation much, much, much worse with mandates and forcing people out of work and forcing nurses out of work and everything else. But let's put that aside because that's years ago. How about we just deal with the last, say, 2 years, where they printed a relentless amount of money. And if you know anything about economics, if you ever did Economics 101 in college, if you print money, then it is going to cause inflation. Your dollar will be worth less. And that's why why every single person watching this in the United States of America knows that when they walk into whatever grocery store they go to, whether it's to buy a dozen eggs or it's a pound of beef or bread, it is significantly higher. And that is not, and Kamala's
We have the
answer
lowest
for that,
inflationary cost of
Price
anybody in the developed
control.
world.
She wants more governmental control over
Dave,
the
Dave,
economy.
Dave,
No,
So
she
everything
wants price gouging to end.
Quickly.
over your lives.
Quickly, just please answer this for me then. Why is it that our economy, just by the objective metrics we use to measure economic performance, came out of the pandemic under Biden-Harris way stronger than our wealthy economy counterparts, and then inflation, we got it down way faster? This was a global phenomenon because of a global crisis that Trump mismanaged, thus exacerbated. And you
I mean, nothing you said
exploit
there was
the
true, so I
painful
don't know that I
fact.
Everything he said there was true. The United States economy is objectively superior to every other economy on earth and every other G7 advanced economy as well. We have managed the COVID crisis to a greater extent than China, than Japan, than the United Kingdom, than Germany, than France, than Russia. None come close. In many macroeconomic ways, we are outperforming our pre-pandemic levels. We have lower unemployment than pre-pandemic. We have greater prime age labor force participation, lower black unemployment, wage gains are on the rise. We're producing more energy than we did pre-pandemic. Even if you control for COVID, job growth under Biden-Harris outstrips job growth under Trump-Pence, even if you don't count COVID against them. And that's Luke's point. What Dave Rubin and Larry Elder, when they're not lying, and they are lying, the other thing that they're doing when they're not lying is gerrymandering the standard. They want you to only count the first 3 years of the Trump presidency. And also, they don't want you to count the fact that Trump inherited a pretty good economy. Trump inherited a pretty good economy from Barack Obama. No. Basically, time didn't exist before January 20th, 2017, when Trump was inaugurated, and then he single-handedly created the U.S. economy. And sure, he was president until January 20th, 2021, but you can't count that last year, they insist, because of COVID. Now, again, if the shoe were on the other foot and it had been Obama or it had been Biden or it had been Harris, they would say, no, you have to count what happened before and you have to count the pandemic. But again, Republicans only know how to play politics in an affirmative style way where you just grade Republicans and Trump on a curve. That's what they're doing. And Trump is, Luke is exposing the hypocrisy there, the double standard. And Dave Rubin is just unable to address that.
Of that moment, you exploit the painful facts of that moment for political purposes. When even on your point about printing money, sure, absolutely the case that that'll cause inflation or contribute to it. So then what do you say about, as Trump was leaving office, him dumping, he added twice that of Biden to the debt, even if you exclude the pandemic, by the way, but especially including it. And you want to push it all into Biden-Harris. You want to exclude from Trump's record the pandemic era, but include it.
But look, here's the problem.
Biden-Harris. It's
but
ridiculous.
Look, here's the problem. You know, I'm not disputing some of what you said there.
Because he can't. But this is the problem. Piers knows that Luke has him beat on the facts, right? Piers also wants to grade Trump on that curve, but can't withstand Luke or Ameisha. So he's like, oh, shit. I can't dispute the fact that GDP growth has been higher under Biden, unemployment is lower under Biden, job growth has been better under Biden, that the U.S. economy is objectively better under Biden than Piers' UK, than again any European Union country, than Japan, than China. I can't do that. So he has to try to find something else to complain about. Very pathetic stuff from Piers Morgan, a guy who just simply can't handle the fact that the Biden-Harris record is objectively superior to the Trump-Pence record. He, of course, will turn to polls. He'll say Americans feel a certain way. That is a problem. That is a political problem that Vice President Harris may not be able to overcome in this election. Polls do matter, but polls are not measure of fact. They're measure of perception. And if they were measure of fact, then Luke could easily turn around and say, okay, Piers, if we're going just based on the polls, okay, well, the same polls that you're citing also say that Donald Trump is more corrupt than Vice President Harris. You're Trump's BFF, Piers. Do you want to concede that Trump is objectively more corrupt than Harris because the polls say she is, say he is? Do you want to concede the fact that the polls say that Vice President Harris is more mentally and physically fit than Trump? That's what the polls say. We can show it to you, the same polls that you're citing. Are you going to concede that? See, he cherry picks. He says basically, here what the polls say, it must be true when it favors Trump. But when the polls say something bad about Trump, he never acknowledges it and won't accept it. Again, because with all due respect to Piers, when it comes to Trump, he's an unprincipled loser and will always lose the debate on Trump. He's no match for these liberal commentators, which is why he has to make it a 3v2.
The other half loves me.
Well, Ameisha, you did better than Luke. Luke, you were trembling there. The bottom lip was going. You couldn't stop yourself. How can you not laugh at that stuff? It's a roast. It's supposed to be a funny roast.
I got you. Wait, I got you. What I was smiling about is I wasn't ready to see on the monitor that you were going to put us up there. So that's funny. But let me clarify. People get in this argument of, does Trump have charisma? Is he funny? Obviously, that's how he built the cult that he built. I'm not concerned with the humor scale of a president. I want someone with character. So I agree. Sometimes he says stuff and I laugh. Sometimes it's because it's so incoherent and embarrassing that I'm laughing at him. But sometimes he says a joke like some of them there and they're perfectly fine. But that's not what determines a president. And he can both be sort of a caricature and sort of silly while also, last time he was president, refusing to leave office until his illegal schemes failed.
Okay.
Last time he was president, mismanaging a global crisis. So can we talk about the substance while I'll acknowledge we don't have to ignore there are moments, mostly because we're laughing at him, where he's inducing laughter.
Yeah, I mean, Larry, I thought...
Again, great response by Luke. So it's so funny because Destiny's run into this too. Piers puts so much emphasis on Trump's humor. And there's no doubt, even though I don't see it, there's no doubt that Trump is objectively charismatic. He has the largest cult in certainly American history, but perhaps world history in the form of MAGA. That takes a level of charisma. But a sense of humor is not the highest criterion for president of the United States, or at least it shouldn't be. Piers always said, well, Trump is funny. Okay, Bill Burr is funny. Do you want Bill Burr to be president of the United States? Jimmy Kimmel's funny. Stephen Colbert is funny. Jon Stewart is funny. Should they be president over Donald Trump? I would prefer them to be president over Donald Trump. But would Piers by that standard? Right? So it's so strange. How about honesty? How about integrity? How about intelligence? How about wit? How about physical and mental fitness? How about education? How about knowledge about domestic and foreign policy? How about political experience? These things are just a smidge more important than your ability to deliver a well-rehearsed knock-knock joke. Unless you're Piers, and then it's just, again, then we just got to throw everything. He compliment Trump's fashion sense really makes him an excellent presidential candidate. Piers, buddy, come on. On character. There again, that's where the polls are against him. Again, he'll cite the polls when they're favorable for Trump. But if you look at character, if you look at honesty, integrity, experience, who's the change candidate, who's compassionate, who's empathetic, who has the mental and physical fitness, who has the competence, Harris reliably beats Trump on those metrics. Piers would never concede those as facts of the matter, and he would probably just explode on camera if ever confronted with them in a way. So anyway, masterful performance by Ameisha Cross and Luke Beasley. Very proud of the performance they gave. Just so proud of Luke. I love the fact that he's giving it back to these MAGA Republicans and Diet MAGA, which is Piers Morgan. And I hope he's back on there soon to do it again. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.